The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition to start debate.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise and speak to Motion 7 this afternoon, particularly since we've just had a really excellent, illuminating conversation with the Minister of Agriculture over the budget over the last hour and a half or so. Mr. Speaker, I can't think of anything that more clearly defines our province than agriculture. It has shaped our landscape, our society, our economy, and indeed our provincial character. And that old adage that there is nothing more constant than the presence of change is particularly true when it comes to farming on Prince Edward Island. Back in 1900, which is just over a century ago, there were 14,000 farms, and their average size was about 87 acres. 85% of the island population of 103,000 people back then lived in rural areas. Almost all of those farms were mixed family farms where a great variety of crops and livestock were being produced. And during that time, the terms islander and farmer were essentially practically synonymous. Almost everybody was a farmer. And although we perhaps never came in reality to be the million-acre farm, over 500,000 acres were actually devoted to field crops back then in 1900. And today, of course, things are very different. We have about 10% of the number of farms present today than were back then. There's less than 1,500 farms now compared to 14,000 at the turn of the last century. And the average size of those farms has increased a lot. It's 5 times what it was back then. About 450 acres is the average size of the island farm now. Still small by global standards, I understand that, but still 5 times what the average size of an island farm was back in 1900. We've seen constant change and several profound upheavals in agriculture over the last few generations, including a really profound one, the emergence of potatoes as the dominant crop here starting in around the 1920s. Many commodities and cash crops such as tobacco and silver foxes have come and gone, and from a business that was almost entirely local and regional in its reach, producers and supply lines are now global in scale, and they're operating in a marketplace that is more impacted by subsidies and tariffs and protections and other distortions than probably any other sector of the economy. But our northern climate and our island boundaries, which both increase pest resistance, and our island soils, which are suitable for root crops, mean that potatoes remain as a central part of farming on Prince Edward Island. New varieties, of course, have replaced the original island blue, for example, such as the Irish cobbler, Green Mountains, and the ubiquitous russet Burbanks, which are not ideally suited to perhaps the future climate here. They don't do well in heat. They have a long growing season. They're susceptible to wireworm, all things which I know that growers and people who do R&D on this are looking at new varieties to replace the russet Burbank. But despite that, all of these new varieties, we went from about 50,000 acres grown in potatoes in the 1920s to, well, they reached their peak in 1984, I think it was, at 100,000 acres of potatoes being grown across this province. And it's dropped back now to the mid 80,000 acres, I think is what, I spoke with the potato board just the other day, actually, and I think the forecast is for just over 80,000 acres of potatoes to be planted in PEI this year. But no matter how many things changed on the farm itself, there were some constants, some universal challenges that were felt by all island farmers, past and present. Market fluctuations, disease, shortage of storage capacity, tariffs, and a generally distorted global marketplace, yields that were not predictable, bumper crops that were no guarantee of big profits, and of course, the vagaries of weather, which has become naturally an increasingly worrisome aspect of farming today. This motion number 7 on sustainable agriculture, calls on this assembly to, and I quote, urge government to adopt an agricultural plan that supports island farmers in forging a prosperous and sustainable future, economically, socially, and environmentally, for farming on Prince Edward Island. Now, my guess is that practically every session of this Assembly, since it was formed, has had a motion of some kind similar to the one before us today. Farming has always been a tough way to make a living, and while there absolutely have been some good times in the past, it's also a past that's been littered with uncertainty, with anxiety, and with hard times. If there was a surefire formula for farmers and governments to overcome the inconsistencies and the trials inherent in agriculture, we would have come up with that long ago. And as we sit here today, the same volatility in prices, in growing conditions, and access to land and to markets are causing severe stresses on our farmers and on our island itself. The Minister was talking a little while ago about the mental health challenges faced by farmers here on Prince Edward Island, and the Farmer Assistance Programme, of course, is a wonderful asset here for growers, which offers 6 free sessions for farmers and their family members. And I think more recently the Minister himself announced the launch of farmerstalk.ca, the site where farmers and growers and their families are encouraged to share their experiences, to open up, and to have a sort of mutual support place to go. These are all incredibly important, but they're also indicative of the stresses and the strains that island farmers are facing. So the central questions, I should say, that I think we need to be asking when it comes to the future of agriculture are these. There are two. The first one, how can agriculture become stable, prosperous, and sustainable, both in terms of economics, socially, and also environmentally? So how can agriculture become sustainable and prosperous? The second question is, what is government's role in helping to accomplish that goal? Sustainability is one of those malleable words that can be stretched and molded to suit your purpose. So I think we have to be really careful in how we use it, especially when it's in the title of a motion and also in the only operative clause as it is in Motion 7. Sustainability has been defined in many ways, but the most frequently quoted definition is from the Brundtland Report in 1987, and it states this: sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. That's again the most sort of widely quoted and accepted definition of what sustainability means. So when we say that we want to make farming here on Prince Edward Island sustainable, what I'm talking about is the need for farmers today to earn a decent living, to access the water and the soil resources that they need to grow their crops, and contribute to the health of society, particularly in our rural areas, all whilst making sure that the ability of future generations of farmers, and indeed all islanders, to enjoy the same opportunities is not compromised. There are a number of principles related to sustainable agriculture that we can look at through an island lens and see where we're doing well, and also where the challenges lie. So let's first look ecologically. I said sustainability was really three-pronged: environmental, economic, and social. So let's look at it environmentally first of all. Sustainable systems, generally speaking, are characterized by having diversity. In this case, diversity of crops. In recent years, we have moved away somewhat from the dominance of potatoes, and that's a good thing. The increase in diversity is good for a whole bunch of reasons. Government funding for a crop study to identify what crops will likely do well in our future growing conditions here on Prince Edward Island in light of climate change was welcomed by the official opposition, for whom this was a budget ask. So I want to thank the Minister and this government for coming forward with the money to do a crop study to enable that greater diversity, which will give us the resilience and put us on that path to sustainability. So diversity is critical. The ongoing protection of water quality and quantity is also, of course, a critical element of sustainable agriculture. Some places in the world have been farming the same land for literally thousands of years. And that land is as productive today and healthy today as it was when their forebears first broke ground. And a large part of this ability to continuously grow food on the same land is the ability to manage water. both to distribute it when it's needed and to make sure that it does not cause harm or any harmful effects at all, such as erosion when it comes when you don't want it or in volumes that you cannot cope with. PEI is in the unusual situation of acquiring all of its water, 100% of its water from groundwater sources, which makes it even more critical that we ensure the preservation of that water, not just for agriculture, but for every other aspect of island society and the economy. However, we also need to recognize that crops will not grow without water. And when we're making decisions about how to use our scarce water resources, we have to consider where our priorities lie. Water for food production is immeasurably more important than water for golf courses, for example, or car washes. The water withdrawal regulations proposed by this government don't yet reflect that. But I'm hoping that with the ongoing research on wells for agricultural use, we'll eventually get to a point where we can feel confident that we have the proper rules in place that will allow controlled and responsible use of water for agriculture. Like the management of water, soil health is fundamental to sustainable agriculture. And those same terraces I was talking about, where farming has been carried out for so many generations, hundreds and thousands of years, manage soil health with equal care. Topsoil is, for all intents and purposes, a non-renewable resource, meaning that once it's gone, it's gone. And it takes so long for topsoil to form that preserving it is absolutely foundational to sustainability. There are all kinds of examples of once fertile and prosperous lands that are now deserts. Making sure that arguably our province's most valuable natural resource, our topsoil, is protected and preserved is absolutely critical to our long-term ability to grow food on this million-acre farm. This means we will likely need to continue to increase our use of soil-building practices like reduced tillage and cover crops, and we need, my gosh, we need a livestock strategy. We also need to consider the state of our forests and of our hedgerows. These and many other factors can drastically affect the health of our soils and ultimately the sustainability of agriculture on Prince Edward Island. Many farmers have been adopting some of these techniques, but there's still so much room to improve, to innovate, and to share these new ideas and practices. Some Indigenous cultures make decisions based on how those choices will impact their community 7 generations into the future. Now that's truly long-term planning and was, I'm sure, a large part of why those cultures were able to live so well for the thousands of years that they did prior to the arrival of settler people here on Turtle Island. So many aspects of agriculture must be kept in view as we try to emulate the longevity and the success of those cultures and so many others around the world who have so much to teach us. Living in harmony with natural processes is key. So monitoring inputs, disease, management and maintenance of soil and water are all central parts of how we will build a truly sustainable agricultural system here on Prince Edward Island. Much is being done to reduce harm and to find better ways to live in balance, coexisting with the rest of nature, but we still have so much to learn, and much work remains for us to become truly sustainable. Consumers are becoming increasingly discerning and are far more aware of where their food comes from and how it's produced. Having confidence that what we put in our bodies is safe and healthy is of increasing importance to more and more people. This presents PEI, the Food Island, with a tremendous opportunity to marry environmental sustainability with consumer demands and therefore market opportunities. And we really need to have a hard look at the economics of agriculture in our province, because the economics of the sector, of course, play a huge role in determining what happens on the farm. We need to look at, for example, access to markets for products, and here government can truly help. The school food program is one example where government procurement, whether it's for schools or hospitals or jails or whatever, if we were to source entirely local products, we would create a massively new market for island producers, boosting the economy and providing and creating those markets for island farmers. That's one thing, that access to markets is critical. Secondly, value added, focusing on regional and local needs with export, of course. And sometimes people have listened to what I have said and other Green Party members over the years and say, oh, they want to do away with export. They don't understand what the economics of agriculture is. And that's not at all what we're saying. We're just saying we need to have a rebalancing. We need to understand that a sustainable future for agriculture will include export, of course, but it has to be primarily and focused on local and regional supply, high value, low volume, value added products which bear that wonderful brand that we can have here, the Food Island, that shouts purity and healthy and sustainable food. We have to look at profit margins and not just farm gate receipts, because if you look at the way that farm gate receipts have gone over the last few years, they are increasing dramatically. But if you look at actual profit margins, they are shrinking, which means that farmers are working hard to produce more crops, to get more money, for higher gate receipts without actually ending up with more money in their pockets. There's something really wrong with that picture. We have to look at how we can get more dollars per acre into the farmers' pockets, not more dollars per acre out to the suppliers and the integrated chains which take so much of the money out of farmers' pockets. We have to look at land values and how that is such a barrier of preventing new farmers. And there are ways that government could, if it so choose, get involved in the real estate bubble which is currently on Prince Edward Island. Vacancy taxes, for example. Proper adherence to the Land Protection Act, and deposits, raising deposits to try and prevent speculative investment in both housing and land here on Prince Edward Island. These are all ways that government could truly influence the marketplace and make things affordable, not just for new farmers, but for islanders looking to buy homes and to settle here on Prince Edward Island. We also have to maintain local infrastructure, abattoirs, storage, processing facilities, all of those things that are critical parts of the supply chain that if they are absent from Prince Edward Island, farmers do not have all of those necessary links to get their produce from the ground to the marketplace. So we need to maintain that local infrastructure. Insurance programs, there's been so much said already this afternoon in the budget discussion about the deficiencies in our insurance programs here and how they are really not working as they should for farmers. We have to look at global marketplace and subsidies and protections and tariffs. We now spend, well, some people estimate it's over $1 trillion a year in subsidies. $700 billion a year is the more oft-quoted figure. That's $2 billion a day in agricultural subsidies, $1 million a minute, $1 million a minute in public money to support agriculture. And much of that is not done in ways that make agriculture more sustainable or more productive or indeed more profitable, but it actually is driving the climate crisis and destroying wildlife and habitat and destroying small farms. We really need to look at the way the global marketplace distorts the market in the subsidies and protections and tariffs that it puts in place. And PEI does have an opportunity to not, of course, escape from that global marketplace, but to protect ourselves to a much greater extent by supporting that local and regional produce that I talked about earlier. We have to also look at labor costs and availability and succession planning. New farmers coming in to buy land and farms these days, I mean, the cost is just astronomical. And when you cannot look ahead and be sure that you're going to have a return on that investment, it's very difficult for anybody other than somebody who is attached to deep pockets to actually become a farmer, new farmer here on Prince Edward Island. We need homesteaders, we need new farmers here. And again, government can do something about that. All three parties were in favour of creating a land bank here, and we have seen, unfortunately, to date, no progress on that. That's 10 parts of separate facets of economics and agriculture that have a profound effect on farming here. I want to give my colleague an opportunity to speak before I sit down. So after I sit down, I should say. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to pretend to have all the answers. Absolutely not. That's what it means for for agriculture to be truly sustainable. The point of this motion is to generate debate, get the ideas out there, illuminate the problems that we have, and they're critical problems. And the future of farming here on PEI is critical in so many ways. So, if we collaborate with farmers and farming organizations, with secondary producers and with rural residents and communities and with other stakeholders, as well as with those who consume food grown here, and there are more and more people who want to know that their food is safe and healthy and comes from a place where it is grown sustainably, we can develop a strategy here for sustainable agriculture that will increase the well-being of the people, of our land, and of this island as a whole. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.